Did you know that BDSM and kink are healthy outlets for aggression, imagination, and attention? Hi, and welcome to The Partition, home of Kinky Wellness. My name is Dana Slosser, and I'm a sexual wellness coach that dives deep into all things kinky. I'm here to show how BDSM and kink deserves a rightful spot within the sexual wellness conversation. So, let's talk about it. In this episode, I'm going to be talking about imagination and how my views on imagination have evolved as I've gotten older. I'm also going to talk about skills that imagination has helped me with and why you should be incorporating some imagination into your life. When my parents got a divorce, I transferred right from my dad's house to my first stepdad's place. So I don't remember a time when I didn't have two dads. Having a stepdad really was what I thought a normal family looked like. And out of all the parents I had, my stepdad was certainly my favorite. Every time he picked me up from a dance recital or a dance class, he would take me to the flower shop, which I absolutely loved because every time I go into a flower shop, it just feels like a flowery jungle. I just love the vibe. Anyways, but as the years went on, my stepdad and my mom's relationship started to deteriorate. After my stepdad and my mom would fight, they would each take turns coming in to say goodnight to us separately. And I remember when my mom would come in, she would just come in and make comments about how we were going to leave, and it always seemed so negative. But when my stepdad came in, I remember him apologizing and being really sorry and apathetic, and how each of them talked to me after their fights was very different. Ultimately, their marriage ended around the time I was 8, but I don't remember moving out. I don't remember packing anything. I don't remember saying goodbyes. We had shared 2 cats and a dog, and I don't even know where the cat and the dog went. I know that we got one of the cats, which was great. But yeah, I didn't get any of these goodbyes that I thought if you were going to leave somebody that you would get. What I do remember is being told that I was going to be staying with my grandparents for a while. And then just like that, yeah, my stepdad was gone. I don't know. I just found it super weird how no one talked about it, like talked about the divorce. It was like all the adults around me were acting like everything was completely normal, which was super confusing as a kid. And I really do wish that someone had just sat me down and explained even what a divorce was. Because as a kid, you don't actually think your step-parent is ever going to leave. Well, at least not in my case. And as far as I was concerned, he was just as much as my dad as my real dad, because I even shared his last name. I actually remember one time I called my dad Daddy by accident, and I started to cry because I had mixed up their names, and it was such a big deal to me. But anyways, yes, after their divorce, we did spend some time at my grandparents'. Then we moved into a new home, but before we had even unpacked, we had moved again into our newest stepdad's house. And I remember it being like super quick because there was no actual real introduction to him. There was no time to even get to know him. It just seemed like we were moved in. And I had no idea who he even was. But it wouldn't have mattered anyways because very quickly after knowing him, I knew I wasn't going to like him. Seriously, the house was always cold and he always made the same disgusting soup over and over again. But really, he was a violent and aggressive man, and luckily for me, this marriage only lasted for about 3 years. However, those 3 years were absolute hell, and I owe my imagination a lot for distracting me during that time. Every day, I would imagine all the different ways my stepdad was going to come in and save me, which eventually progressed to imagining all the reasons why he hadn't saved me yet. Really, I thought about him more than anybody else for a long, long time. Even through all the years, and I think really into my 20s, I used to think and just imagine of alternative lives and timelines where I was living with him instead, and what my life would be like had I gone and lived with my stepdad instead of my mom. But this constant obsessive white knight narrative that I was doing eventually sunk into my subconscious, and I see now that I spent a good portion of my life seeking some sort of white knight to come in and save me, which I believe is one of the reasons why I was in some really dependent and complicated relationships. It wasn't until I started exploring the helpless damsel theme kink that I even started to notice what I was even doing. The more that I acted out being this helpless damsel in distress, the more that I was able to see when I was acting like that in the quote-unquote real world. And after I started noticing that, I just couldn't not notice it. And then I started to realize that there were so many other feelings that I was secretly doing or not even aware that I was doing that weren't doing me any good in my day-to-day life. And some of those feelings were pity and sympathy. And the more that I thought about it, the more that I noticed that all of these feelings were somehow linked to the feeling of hopelessness. And then boom, it was like my house of cards were starting to fall. There was a little bit of me that actually gets off on the feeling of being hopeless and pity and sympathy and things like that. But that was not easy for me to admit. Up until this point, I had built this I can do everything and anything and no one's going to help me complex. And I feel that I had attached it to my ego. And I would never use the words hopeless to describe myself. Who would? I really did take pride in the fact that I did so many things by myself. And I acted like I was going to be the only one or could be the only one who could save me. But now I know for sure that deep down inside that I really didn't believe that at all. Because it always seemed that I was making decisions that were putting me in situations where I was waiting or searching or looking for someone to come and save me. So yeah, I guess I do like the feeling of hopelessness. But growing up, hopelessness was not a feeling that was a stranger to me. In fact, I knew it quite well. And BDSM and kink showed me that there is a big part of me that's actually quite comfortable in the feeling of hopelessness. But that is certainly not going to help me when I'm trying to live a happy life. So as I created more and more damsel in distress scenes in my dom-sub partnerships, it was like I was really waking up to all the silly decisions I was making because I was able to bring those feelings forward and identify them through kink. I also realized during this that I looked at the world through a somewhat of a hopeless lens, even in situations where I didn't need to. So by seeing this, I was able to make the appropriate changes to fix these little issues of mine. And waking up also showed me that when my imagination is left untamed and roaming around in my brain with no real purpose, it turns against me. It's like my imagination is like a toddler, and if I'm not careful and I'm not watching it or properly taking care of it, it certainly gets up to no good somewhere. The best part about all this was when I realized that my imagination doesn't always need to be used so negatively. And even when there is negative things going on in my life, I'll use my imagination to put a pause on that negativity to make believe a better situation. Or in other words, I just use my imagination for creative thinking and problem solving, which is why I think we all need imagination. We need imagination to build these skills just like this, because without imagination, we'll never be able to think of creative ways to get us out of sticky situations, or just being creative in general. The only people who literally have an excuse not to use their imagination are people who suffer from aphantasia. I'm pretty sure it's called aphantasia. Aphantasia is the term for people who literally cannot see mental images in their mind. But seriously, this is super rare. So unless you have that, go exercise your imagination. Because for me, identifying that I was using my imagination with negativity, I was able to stop doing that. Because really, if I had to make a choice on how to use my imagination to view my life through, why would I choose? Why would anyone choose to use it for such a sad and useless point of view like hopelessness? Albert Einstein actually has a couple of good quotes about imagination, and I want to give you two that I really, really like. The first one goes like this: imagination is more important than knowledge, for knowledge is limited, whereas imagination embraces the entire world, stimulating progress, giving birth to evolution. Wow. Wasn't he so smart? But seriously, I can't really agree more. I'm serious when I say that more people need to find outlets for using their imagination. Because so many of us are in problems that I feel could easily be fixed by ourselves if we used a little creativity and thought outside the box. Which actually leads me to my second quote by Albert Einstein. Logic will get you from A to B. Imagination will take you everywhere. So when I find myself in times where I'm not having a good time, I just use my imagination to take me somewhere else that makes me happy. And then I use my imagination to build the steps on how I'm going to do it. Thinking outside the box is what creates new, creates progress. We need it. Even on an individual level, I don't feel that most of us want to be the same person as we were last year. I generally do come across most people that they want to get better or they want to progress in something. But regardless, I certainly know that I don't want to be the same person every year in a row. So in order to be a different person, I need to use my imagination to see what type of person I can even become. Through BDSM and kink, I not only get to use my imagination to see the type of person I want to become, but I also get to use my imagination to see the type of person that I don't want to become. But even better, I get to act them out, which really means that I don't lose on any type of experience. Because in the end, I'm glad that none of my imaginations originally came true when I was younger. Because right now is when I'm actually living my best life. And I wouldn't change any of it. So even if you don't want to exercise your imagination through sex, that's totally fine. But I still believe you need an outlet to do it. So in the description, I posted a link to an article that actually outlines 10 ways to develop your imagination. But the too long didn't read it version goes like this. Read, daydream, socialize, assist, play, ask, create, share, meditate, and study. Again, the longer version will be in the description. So go do something imaginative today and tell me all about it. Well, that's it for me. Thank you for listening. And if you're new here or to the BDSM scene, check out my e-learning video BDSM Basics at thatpartition.life, where I make it easy to learn the basics of BDSM and kink. Again, that's www.thepartition.life. Again, thank you for listening. Tune in next week. And as always, stay kinky.